Good evening and welcome, everyone. My name is Lucila Silva Santisteban. I am a member of the ASLA New York Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, which is the committee that organizes these events. As a former BIPOC dialogue participant, I am very excited to present this quarterly webinar series that focuses on the work, career, service, and leadership of prominent and soon-to-be prominent BIPOC professionals in landscape architecture. As the title suggests, this webinar is set in a dialogue format between an established and emerging professional rather than the standard presentation format we're all used to. The aim of this webinar is to advocate the talents and contributions of our BIPOC members and have a dialogue to highlight and celebrate the diversity of our landscape architecture community. Tonight we are joined by Stephen Tupu, founder and principal at Terrain, New York City, and Ethan Ramos, landscape designer at Harrison Green. Stephen grew up in Aotearoa in the Pacific, a son of a Samoan immigrant father and Kiwi mom. Stephen's family was dedicated to service, to their larger extended Pacific Island family and the growing Pacific Island community at large, and an understanding of responsibility beyond family was instilled at an early age. Stephen trained and worked as a tailor, cooked in kitchens, built dry stone walls, and studied horticulture before discovering landscape architecture. Graduating with a bachelor's degree in landscape architecture with honors from the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, RMIT, in Melbourne, Stephen's eclectic creative education and interests have created a unique design process driven by research and experimentation that guides his practice of landscape architecture. Stephen was elevated to Council of Fellows at the American Society of Landscape Architects in 2025. Ethan receives a bachelor's degree in landscape architecture with honors from the University of New South Wales, UNSW, in Sydney, Australia. Ethan has worked in both Australia with Place Design Group and now in New York with Harrison Green, providing him with experience in large range of projects at various scales, both public and private. Ethan's passion lies in creating thoughtful, well-designed landscapes that are accessible to low-income and underprivileged communities. He believes landscapes play a crucial role in shaping community identity and in telling the stories of the people who inhabit them. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and that recording will be shared at ASLA New York website. Now please set your view to speaker mode and mute your microphone on your Zoom screen for the dialogue to start. Towards the end of the program, we will have time for additional questions and conversations between the audience and the speakers. Stephen and Ethan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for that introduction. It was great. Maybe, Stephen, we can start about how Tewook sort of approached you about this, because I think he does a great job of, with all the previous webinars, matching the right people to sort of give a very in-depth and very insightful sort of conversation and dialogue.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm really just happy to be here with you, Ethan, and to meet you. And I want to thank, a local chapter, Lucy and Tewook and David, for setting this up. And yes, to be honest, I was pretty suspicious. I find these sort of, sort of like combinations of sort of people in this sort of setting, just a little, it was just, I just needed a moment to sort of like get into it. And so, but soon, soon after we met and we've had a couple of chats, and it's been really fun sort of digging through some of our histories and sort of making these connections. And it's just been, it's been really great. So thank you, Tewook, for, trusting in us and sort of matching us up.
Yeah, definitely. So with that being said, maybe we can get straight into a bit of your early life. I know a lot of people might be coming from different backgrounds and might not understand where you're coming up from. So I know New Zealand has a very unique background and upbringing and landscape in itself. So maybe you can start there.
Sure, yeah. So I, grew up, well, first of all, like, talofa lava, kia ora. I grew up in Aotearoa, and, my mum's family, came from sort of like, her heritage is Scottish and English. And
Mm,
so they came out on sailing ships, in the late 1800s. And then my father, immigrated from Samoa when he was a teenager, and came at the beginning of a big wave of, Pacific Islanders coming from the islands, for education,
mhm.
um, and coming to find work. And so, yeah, he was one of 13 kids, and he was chosen, and traveled on a banana boat
Yeah.
from Samoa, and arrived. And, I think, yeah, his journey, it's been interesting sort of being here, but sort of reflecting on some of his sort of, his early experiences coming to a new place and sort of like
Yeah.
adapting, and so, yeah, I think, I mean, for me, mum and dad, mum and dad, they sort of met at university, um, and made a family move to Wellington and had 5 kids. And, I think coming from two different sort of worlds in a way, like it was sort of uncommon for someone like my mum and someone like my father coming from Samoa, to marry
Yeah.
and to make a family. And that was an unusual sort of, moment. And so, but, they were, super engaged with, the Pacific Island community. And, our home was really a place of, a lot of families that came after sort of, would call on us and, come around at night and, need help translating and kind of, deciphering kind of this new world. And so really early on, some of my earliest memories are of the sort of wider Pacific Island Samoan community. And, this was we were, 5 of us and some cousins in our
Mm.
house, but it was definitely sort of filled with extended and other families coming in and, connecting with us. And so, that's a really strong part of, I think, all of us, experiencing that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that because from what I understand, because I also grew up with a lot of Pacific Islanders, family and community is like a very important, very important thing. And like it almost I feel like it's a value that's instilled and, sort of carries on with, with your growth and where you end up, right?
Yeah, and I think the sort of connectedness and, really strong familial ties and, sort of deep cultural connections have definitely made it, for me, being here. And, a lot of my sort of siblings have also traveled and lived, outside of New Zealand. And I
Hmm.
think I think it's a really strong sort of, and I meet Pacific Islanders here, and, um, and there's such a strong tie, cultural tie through language, through, ritual and telling stories, and, landscape and moana. And, and I think, um, that's something I've thought about sort of being here and sort of living here. And,
Yeah.
and it's sort of, yeah, it's definitely helped me and kind of impacted our work and sort of
Yeah.
like what we do in the office.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like at an early age or growing up, you were aware of this, that identity of being Samoan, being part, Anglo-Saxon? And do you think your parents really sort of tried to instill that in you, or
You mean, and
culturally maybe, or like,
you mean sort of sitting between like in these sort of two worlds?
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah,
Or
I
it was just
think,
normal. It was just,
I mean, for us, it was, yeah, it wasn't. it wasn't explicit, but I think that at that time in Wellington, there were a lot of other communities moving to Wellington to kind of for educational, so big Greek community, Indian, other Pacific Island, families were moving in, and so it was definitely, I think early on, there's definitely been a big shift and sort of change and sort of embracing Kiwis embracing Maori and sort of Pacific Island culture, like that's quite different now. And I would say we've come a long way as a kind of nation, So, but growing up in our family, no, I mean, I've been influenced by, my grandmother teaching me to sew and craft and knit, and, and my father's side sort of teaching me to fish and to forage. And, I feel very lucky to kind of have those sort of two worlds and
Yeah.
two sort of cultural threads.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely fed into having a sort of freedom of creativity and then I think personally, I just all over the place, really, in terms of like what I'm interested in. I mean,
Yeah.
very eclectic, and was cooking early. Went to university once I finished sort of high school. Dropped out of university. I'd enrolled in physics, which was totally like crazy. But then I just ended up like hanging out in kitchens, working and just sort of living and really exploring all of these other kind of interests. And in
Yeah.
some ways, I'm still doing that now, and it feels sort of like it felt totally chaotic then,
Yeah.
But I feel really fulfilled, and my parents and my family, we've all sort of supported us doing what we felt like doing. We weren't really pushed
Yeah.
into university or a particular way. I mean, in some ways,
Okay.
I wish they were a bit more like, sort of guiding. But I think that's a really good thing. I think it's good that we've sort of gone out there and tried a lot of different things.
Yeah, I remember you saying your dad was also sort of like that. He was also very much curious about things and trying different things. Do you feel like
Yeah,
that
I
was
mean, I
something?
think my father, Lani, Toyoti Lani Tupu, he arrived in New Zealand, very little English, learned, was
Mm,
at a sort of religious school, learned English, played guitar, and is, did a lot of, was very involved in a lot of other things. But essentially was a community organizer and really, his life was really about service. And I think that's something that's definitely kind of influenced the kind of, rest of our family and what we do. And but still very eclectic, was an
mm.
actor and
Yeah,
did a
wow.
lot of other sort of had a lot of things, different pieces of his life. And my mum too has like worked at the local hospital, and it's very much about connecting to the community and just sort of supporting other families in
Yeah.
our neighborhood.
Yeah, it seems like that was like a shared value between them, maybe. Yeah. Do you so just bringing it back to New Zealand, do you have any maybe fond memories of any landscapes there to sort of give people some contextual?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, some of my earliest memories are kind of sitting in the garden.
Yeah.
And we, similar to you, I mean, you grew up in a suburb, south, Sydney. We grew up in a suburb in Wellington, on a terrace on a kind of really kind of steep terrain overlooking, um, the airport and the kind of bays. But every square inch of our like, garden
Hmm.
was planted, and it was like productive. We had chickens, when we were growing things like, potatoes, which is sort
Yeah.
of, and corn, which is sort of crazy because I mean, it's like, it takes so long and you only get four,
Yeah.
and we've got a family of like seven or eight. But I think that there was, just the idea of transforming and cultivating was just really strong in our, and it still is,
Hmm.
in terms of gardening kind of interest. So, very early interested in sort of horticulture and gardening and the kind of craft and making.
Yeah.
Um, and, we, as our family sort of, grew, I mean, our family home was in a constant state of renovation for like 30 years or something. And
Yep.
so there was always, it was very dynamic. There's always things going on, and, like a new room would be built for another, sibling, or
Hmm.
I don't know. It was everything was sort of possible, and I feel so lucky to sort of have a childhood like that.
Yeah.
And in some ways, growing up in New Zealand, we're sort of so far from Europe and the US.
Hmm.
And I think that's part of the sort of Kiwi ethos of, you can't buy it, so you kind of have to make it, And so I think there's a real resourcefulness that I think I would say a lot of Kiwis would sort of relate to, And so, and I think that's kind of um, been helpful in my sort of career of just being really careful and sort of like reusing things. And, I think probably in Australia too, a similar kind of ethos of, making the most out of what you have and,
Oh yeah, definitely. I think even beyond that, maybe like because I'm also so I'm Filipino, and whenever I come back to the Philippines to visit, it's very apparent how like resourceful Filipinos can be. They'll be using the randomest things for, basic functionality, and it is very creative and it is very resourceful. So I think, yeah, that sort of maybe is a thought that translates throughout. Yeah.
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 So what was it like, growing up in your suburb and, what was your childhood like? Like, what did you,
Mm.
how did you spend, what was, were you close to parks or like open space and, wild?
Yeah. Yeah. So being in the suburbs as well, a lot of green space. I think Campbelltown, so that I was born and raised in Western Sydney, Campbelltown. Um, I remember seeing a sign saying it was like Australia's first green suburb. I don't know how true that is. But anyway, there was a lot of access to kind of open space. I wouldn't say so much parks. It was like a pond. That was my park, I guess.
Yeah.
And then growing up, my mom can attest to this, but I could never sit still. So I was always, whenever I was doing homework,
That sounds familiar.
yeah, I'd pretend I read a book and then told her I read so I can go outside and play. But all my memories, I think, from my childhood was just being outside in the front yard
Hmm.
or riding down to the pond. And like those are memories I vividly remember. I don't really remember the interior of my house, but I for
Yeah.
some reason
Wow.
can like vividly remember, public spaces, like the spaces I was able to experience as a
Yeah.
child. So yeah, that was kind of my upbringing. And in terms of like people, for me, it was actually very easy for me to get along with you because I grew up in like in an area that was predominantly also Polynesian, so I had a lot of Samoan and Tongan friends growing up. But it was also a very diverse working class sort of community where I grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So how did you find landscape architecture? You know,
Oh yeah. It's always a funny conversation. And I'm sure like a lot of people, I feel like I've heard a lot of times now that people have had the same experience, but um in high school, I knew I wanted to do architecture because my godbrother and my cousin talked about it, and I was like, okay, that sounds cool. I'll try that.
hmm.
Didn't really know what else to do, and I loved art and design. So I set out to do architecture, but in Australia, we have something called the ATAR, and that grants you, I guess, grants you access to study whatever field you want. And I didn't get a high enough ATAR, so um, I, an option was landscape architecture, and I saw architecture in the word, so I thought it was like, okay, I guess it's
That's so
somewhat the
funny.
same thing.
Yeah.
And then
I've heard that story before. It's like,
yeah,
oh, okay, so maybe I'll take this one.
yeah, yeah, and
So you
then
check that box.
I checked that box, did did the intro to landscape architecture class, and realized it was completely different. And so for a few years, I was trying to get into architecture, but then um, I think it was the third year where we had the history of landscape architecture with Professor Werrick, which you
I know,
also
it's so crazy.
had,
Yeah.
which is crazy. But that's when I started to really understand, um, what landscape architecture was about. And
Mhm.
we were also preparing for our thesis and graduating design project, and we had to think about what we wanted to study and delve into and what our interests were. And I realized that landscape architecture was a means of or could be like a way to make a social impact. Um, and that's when I started to fall in love with it.
Yeah.
You can really impact an experience in a community. And for me, it was like low income communities and
Mhm.
realizing like the disparity between like areas where I grew up in and people close to me grew up in versus, you know, the city folk or people in more higher class.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah,
No, James was, he taught history at RMIT.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Interesting.
um, I mean, I came to, for me, finding landscape architecture was, it took me a while. Like I was
Yeah.
doing so many other things. I was, like I really loved sewing, and so I enrolled and studied at a fashion institute in Auckland, and then I was working part-time at this kind of little tailoring shop, and then I would be cooking at night to kind of like pay my way.
Oh, okay.
And then I was also really, I just love sort of gardening and horticulture. And so I was also doing, I studied horticulture and then really just kind of fell in love with sort of native plants and New Zealand,
Mm,
New Zealand landscapes and really enjoyed being in the bush and going on these treks. And so, but it wasn't until like, a friend of mine said, "Oh, there's a landscape architecture, or there's a garden design conference in Melbourne. I mean, you're doing all these crazy things. Like seriously, you should, focus and maybe you should go and go to this conference,
mhm,
And so I went, and yeah, I just met all of these garden designers from all over the world, and that people that I had sort of read about, these horticulturalists. But I also met and was invited to RMIT, and I to sit in some of the landscape architecture design studios.
mm,
And I sat in one, and my mind, it just blew my mind, and I was like, wow, this is it, And so it just felt really right. And I think for me, it drew a lot of these eclectic sort of seemingly kind of disconnected interests, and just drew them together in a way that I was really excited about sort of finding something. And so came back and then applied and then got in and then met James Werrick,
yeah.
and he was just starting, and it was kind of a really exciting time in Australia, in sort of landscape architecture in Australia and New Zealand. It was
Mm,
kind of this move from sort of agricultural landscape sort of focused, plant focused, into something that was urban theory, design strong, and so I really sort of found my people, and I felt, for the first time really excited and comfortable, and I don't know, put a lot of things together. And I had,
yeah.
being in Melbourne too, like really interesting city, public transport, pedestrian, little laneways, like I don't know,
It was
it was
very
just a
different.
really beautiful, yeah. So, and it was coming from Wellington, it was like, okay, this is a big city, you know.
Oh,
Public transport, the trams, gardens, yeah. So really, it was really exciting time to kind of go back to university and sort of have another shot at it, you know. And so I felt really, yeah, I felt really sort of happy that I,
yeah.
you know, relieved that I kind of found something that kind of put a lot of things together, you know.
So you weren't convinced that you wanted to do fashion. It was kind of just like a
Not for a, yeah, not,
you
and
enjoyed.
cooking too. Like I
Mm.
cooked a lot in a lot of restaurants. It was just
Oh
like
wow.
super hard work, and you know, it's late, it's wet, it's dirty, it's stink, you know, and no, and I kind of, yeah, I felt like I wanted to design, and I really, you know, wanted to kind of draw and plan and think and kind of, and yeah, and I kind of, you know, but I still love all of those things. I still sew now, and you know, and all of those things are kind of, it still makes sense. But I think landscape architecture for me, it's just, I love it, you know,
Yeah.
and it's just been a great sort of, and I've talked to so many other landscape architects that have really diverse kind of interest, and it kind of, it sort of reinforces like, okay, you know, like I found my sort of people, you know,
Yeah.
and so so I kind of, I can identify with, you know, your feeling of also finding that and putting a few of these things together, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like an aha moment, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah. 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 And then it's funny how you talk about like it's this you found the thing that brought all your passions and interests together. And it's almost like how your dad was instilling one thought and I guess values and interests, and also your mom's side of like the creative and like the
yeah,
DIY.
all,
So
yeah,
all
no, that's
together,
right.
right?
Yeah, no, it feels really, you know, I feel lucky, you know, to sort of find something that kind of draws on a lot of, you know, my experiences as a child and a sort of family, you know, interests and connections and, you know, Pacific kind of world, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Oananui, like that feels, it feels really like there's a lineage, you know, through our families to kind of what I'm doing and probably what you're
Yeah,
doing
right.
now, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
But
true.
it takes a while to sort of find that, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, a little longer than usual.
Yeah. And how was your time at RMIT?
I mean,
Was it?
it was amazing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I met a whole lot of other misfits, and
Yeah.
we had a blast in Melbourne. I mean, we would rent studios because, you know, space was cheap. So we rented studios downtown, big loft spaces. We worked on a whole bunch of competitions. And, you know,
Wow.
there was a group of students that we all got together and organized an international landscape architecture conference, you know, as
Yeah.
students. And
Wow.
we, you know, we were sort of like wanted to change the world, right? So we invited everybody and everybody came, you know, like we had amazing, you know, landscape architects and theorists and designers from all over the world. And we had this amazing 3-day event. And I would say it really, I feel like looking back on it now, it's really been a kind of a bookend in some ways to a lot of the interesting work that's happening, and a lot of other, you know, firms kind of sprouted off that, and you know, it's really grown, and you know, people like James Werrick in Sydney and the Melbourne School, and it really, I think, strengthened landscape architecture as a sort of contemporary
Mm-hmm.
practice and really thinking about the city and the urban, our urban life and urban transformations, you know, and I think, yeah, I mean, you look now, I mean, we as a profession, you know, we're leading so many big complex projects. Like we are leading. The architects are often, you know, sub-consultants to our work, you know, like we are leading these complex teams. And I think we have our culture understands the sort of importance of communication and drawing a lot of things together, you know, to do these complex things. These are not a sort of one thing. It's much more about communication in a field of curating and bringing all of these characters and, voices together. And I think more than ever, cities really need that now.
Oh yeah.
So it's been, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you came at a really pivotal moment, I guess, in landscape architecture, especially in like New Zealand and Australia. Yeah.
yeah, and I think I'm really, I feel really lucky to have had that experience. Um, and I think being here, and finding my way here, and a lot of it was
Yeah.
um, New York was one of those, sort of urban sort of just images, right, that you have when you go to school, and read so much about all of these landscapes and landscape architects, and center beginning of our profession, Central Park,
Hmm.
um, and so I found my way here, and I was lucky enough to kind of find work, and again, similar, really exciting moment to come to this city and connect with other creatives. And this was the mid 90s, and so it was a city that was recovering from a big recession. It was just starting to kind of be safer. Some of the neighborhoods that have been sort of um, you know um, had really been battered by a lot of the recession, and kind of like been really hard. And
Hmm.
so I think when I arrived here, it was just starting to kind of like tip up. And when I think back now, like all of the waterfronts and so many of the public spaces have happened in that span. And to be here and to be sort of part of that, and I feel really lucky to kind of, have been part of that kind of transformation of this city.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm curious, like, what you know, your journey, like coming here. I mean, how did that happen? And
It's I always find it funny because it's also similar to how I got into landscape architecture. It's almost like an accident as well.
it's like another,
Yeah. Yeah,
like a
but
missed flight. Like you were on
yeah,
this flight,
yeah,
but you ended up.
basically. And this is where I feel like we have very similar values because I remember you told me one time it's like you should always just go for, these opportunities because they're fleeting and you don't know where
Mhm.
you end up. But I I took like a bit of a gap year after working a few years in Australia because I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do. And took a gap year. That was great. I took a gap year in Toronto, great city.
So what
Um,
did you do?
I was just working retail. Yeah, I was just kind of having fun, I guess. Exploring the city, kind of traveling a bit here and there. Um, but then on the way back, because I was going to come back to Australia and really just try to get into my career, my friend,
But you had graduated at this point, right?
yeah,
Okay,
I already worked like two years in Sydney at that
okay,
point.
yeah.
So it was after 2 years, that's when I left. And then yeah, so on the way back, that's when my friend that I studied in university with, Nicole, she was already working at Harrison Green where I work at the
Oh,
time.
okay, yeah.
And so Damien, who's one of the founders, it's Damien and Jackie Harrison, but he's also Australian and he also studied at UNSW and probably had work as well. He's a link
We have to
between.
call him after this.
Yeah, invite him out. But he's always been a very encouraging of like having Aussies work for him. He loves, the work ethic and the way we sort of approach design, which is awesome. He's had a lot of Aussies come through
Yeah.
the office, but he gave me a chance and I was like, Toronto, New York is on the way to Toronto, so I was like, I might as well give it a go and got the job and now I'm here and like there's so much, like you said, the diversity and everything about the city was kind of like it was kind of mind-blowing for me.
Hmm.
Coming from suburban, Western Sydney, and then to like the big city of New York. It was kind of crazy for me, and the pace and everything is just so different. Me personally, I never set out to go to New York. That was never in my
Yeah.
book, but yeah, I found my way here, and it's been such a enlightening and insightful and especially growing opportunity experience for me, I think.
Yeah.
And you probably felt the same way, right? Like, did you want to come to New York? Was that always part of your goal, or?
I mean, I was so interested in to come and, as I was saying before, just to kind of come to this place that has so much history in terms of our
Yeah,
profession and to kind of, be part of the transformation that was happening, like all the waterfronts have happened in that time. Um, but yeah, and I think, typically like a lot of Kiwis would go to the UK and I just wanted a kind of different, I was just interested in to come here and to the US and to have yeah, to have a different experience. And, to be honest, when I arrived and I, felt for the first time, it was so crazy, so different, even from Melbourne, um, and so diverse in terms of different communities and food and the intensity and the kind of, and just this kind of big mishmash. And
hmm.
I felt so at home so
Wow.
quickly. And in some ways, I was thinking, it's because I felt sort of anonymous and that felt really comforting, like it was in this big city, anything could happen. And, no one really cared where you came from, if you could
Yeah,
do the job,
yeah,
and I really appreciated that it wasn't like which school did you go to or, which university. And I think for me that just felt like a really good place to be,
yeah,
and it's given me a lot. I feel really lucky to be, to build my career here and um open an office and to kind of continue, to sort of support my team and, what we're doing and to kind of, I don't know, develop that way of working, and to be able to sort of now be big part of the sort of next transformation and to kind of focus on a lot of these, these parts of the city that kind of need help and, so
mm,
yeah, I mean, it's really exciting
yeah,
place to come. And, I felt at that time it was, well, you could live pretty, you could work 3 days a week in a bar or a restaurant and make art the rest of the time,
wow.
but it's not the case now. But, I think that was a really special time and a lot of creative energy and a lot of, um, I don't know, just the city was really quite different. And I'm glad that I saw a part of that city, Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it seems like it just is suited your eclectic sort of taste, right? And your want for just and curiosity, I guess, for everything.
Yeah,
You have access to like
yeah, I
what
mean, I love being really close to, I mean, our office is just across from FIT, really close to like a
mm.
lot of the fabric stores that I like. I should probably not, should probably be banned from them. But yeah, I think it's a city, like if you have a lot of eclectic, sort of interests, you can you can find
Mhm.
them, and I just love that. I think that is really exciting, to be in a place that you have these diverse interests. You can do them in parallel to your life, you can have these different things going on, and not every
Yeah.
city can sort of offers that.
Yeah, I love how you say like there's this like you and what did you say? And I think it was you said that when you were here that you felt anonymous almost.
Yeah.
Like, was that almost like a motivating factor for you? Like, did that almost help you build up terrain and just like give you the confidence to just do whatever you want? Like, I feel like New York City is very like entrepreneurial type of city. Like, you just,
Yeah. I mean, No, I mean, I think, well, one of the surprising things, no, that's a good point. Like, and I think I'm sure other creatives would probably sort of talk about this too, but you know, in terms of opening your own business or, you know, office is I was struck. I mean, I think you know, it was totally sort of unplanned. Like I didn't really have a project, but I knew that I didn't want to I wanted a different experience, you know, and so
Do you mean
just in terms of like you know, opening terrain and kind of building a practice. But you know, it was amazing. I mean, my experience here was once, you know, friends and colleagues heard that, you know, it opened terrain. I had so many people that came out of the woodwork and offered me, you know, just help, you know, like, do you need space? Do you need some legal advice? Do you need, I don't know, it was like I was just blown away. And I don't think that would have happened in the same way if I was in Australia or New Zealand.
Yeah.
And I think there's such a celebration of entrepreneurial spirit, like totally insane to do it. But and I really appreciate it. That was totally unexpected for me.
Yeah.
And it really continues to be a little bit like that, you know, and I think that's a beautiful part of this, the way the city the sort of ecology of the city and kind of entrepreneurial and people having ideas and wanting to make something, you know, and that was really cool. And
Yeah.
you know, it's really struck me when that happened.
Yeah. So going back a bit, wa- was there a reason? Was there a pivotal moment, or why did you start Terrain, I guess?
I really was, you know, for me, I think, and a lot of it is coming, you know, comes from where I came from and growing up in Aotearoa and this sense of like an extended, you know, network of histories and wanting to build a practice that was really truly collaborative
Mm.
and I think had an impact on some of the communities, like I, you know, from you know, my family experience and my, you know, my parents, you know, having opening their home to so many families that needed sort of help and, you know, like I can see the sort of lineage. And I think that was a driving force, you know, like probably not as conscious as I realize now, but yeah, I think it was more wanting to kind of, you know, design a practice, you know, in a way. And I think is yeah, I think we have the freedom to kind of create the way how we want to work, you know? Um, and I think here it's possible to do that, you know? Like you don't have to do it in a particular way. I think you have you know, the freedom to build something that's kind of unique in the way that you know you imagine, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And do you feel like your Samoan or New Zealand sort of background influences show up in your work at all? Like, or do you think it's
I mean, I would say that it's less about sort of a, you know, showing up in my work. I think
mm,
it's more like, you know, I was bestowed a chief title, you know, not long after I sort of arrived here.
oh,
And, you know, as a Matai, as a high chief in our extended family, you know, a lot of the responsibilities are about you know, family connections, storytelling, support, and helping sort of younger practitioners or, you know, just young designers to kind of find their voice, you know. And so that's been really, you know, that's been something that's definitely grown in me and the sort of being here, it's more like and realizing, you know, being here and the skills that we learn as landscape architects can really have an impact in other parts of where we come from, you know. And so, yeah, you know, in our family, my siblings, we've all contributed to projects in Samoa, in our village in Falalima, and you know, we've,
oh,
you know, sort of modest interventions and you know, fresh water and setting up, you know, native tree nursery and kind of replanting along our edge, but it's really I think it's taken a while to sort of understand that we can have an impact in our, sort of in our historical family connections, in ways that we can do that sort of being here, being here and living here and having a life here. And so for me, that's really exciting to kind of keep that fire going and to continually to make. And, I connect with a lot of Pacific Island, architects and designers and anthropologists and writers and artists that throughout the Pacific. And that's been that's been grounding for me. And I know for us as a community, that's been really important to kind of keep those lines, sort of
Yeah,
strong, and despite the distance, yeah.
that's
I mean, I
awesome.
wonder, for you, do you have similar um sort of experience of, your lineage or your history as a Filipino in your family? Like, are there things, are there parts of that resonate with you here, being
Yeah.
so far away? And
I've thought about it. I think maybe the one thing I feel like that sort of shows up in it's maybe more so how I see a space. I I look at a space now and I guess it's more a bit, how do I say this? It's more of an awareness and understanding that all these different communities use a space differently, and trying to be aware and conscious of designing a space for everyone, I guess,
yeah,
and how do we approach that? So I think for me at this point in my career, it's more questions than
yeah, yeah.
answers, I guess.
But that's great
And
to have those, questions, right? And just be
yeah,
aware of like
yeah.
that influence,
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And it's awesome that you sort of make that link and you sort of that connection back to home. I think that's truly inspiring. Like I do want to I don't know how, maybe later in my life, I do want to
Yeah,
be able to do that because, I'm sure Samoa is the same and Philippines is the same, where they're a bit more behind in this regard and their understanding of landscape architecture, but it's definitely a growing thing, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Well,
Yeah.
that's a good little sort of mission to think about, right?
Yeah, because it's funny because there is also such a deep understanding of landscapes
Hmm.
in those countries, but in a more landscape design sense, it's just something that's untapped. So it'd be interesting to see, the traditional and ancient understandings of the land and how you
Hmm.
sort of pair that to landscape architecture as an industry.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know. Is that
That's
sort of something you
Yeah,
you
no, that's yeah. No, I think
experience?
yeah, no, I think about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think working there and having open conversations, I think is really fruitful for like our work and writing and, um yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So Ethan, I think
Oh,
we're good in terms
Yes.
of yeah. Does that sound good?
Hello,
Lucy,
guys. Yeah, I think we're
for Q&A?
in a good time. Yes, we're in a good Q&A moment. I don't know. I wanted to start the Q&A while the questions come in, and thank you first of all for sharing with us everything that you have, your experiences, your journeys, and but just going back, well, I guess like one step a bit of what was your experience coming into the US from the beginning, like your immigration experience, like did you experience that maybe you were put in a box once you were arrived to the US? Was it more uh like free? Like I'm curious to know how was that first moment when you arrived to the US and you say I'm a landscape architect or well, but good. Yeah, I don't know. Curious to know.
Do you want to go first? Do you want to?
you
Yeah.
can-
So I think, look, I mean, arriving in the mid 90s here was a very
Mm-hmm.
different immigration experience than now. and even just like, more recently. But yeah, I mean, I think I was, sort of resourceful and had a few sort of connections. But I think early on, I worked really hard. I mean, I sort of put the mahi in and was able to sort of get enough sort of published, competitions and different, it's kind of active when I first arrived. And that definitely helped me apply, ultimately got a green card and was able to, sort of like stay. And, but I think that's a very different time in the city. And, um, yeah, I feel, yeah, I mean, that was my experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same. Yeah, I don't think I felt like I was put in a box. I think coming to New York and the amount of diversity here, I felt even less inside a box, and funny enough than in Sydney, which
Wow, that's
is a
interesting. Then
is interesting.
working in Sydney.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much. If the general public wants to chime in, please go ahead. I'm gonna mute my.
Steven, I have a question for you. So, I found the most interesting aspect about your, well, you is that you are the Samoan chief or Matai, which is fascinating to me because I don't know much about it. And it feels like you are different from the rest of us, kind of makes me feel like an underling before Samoan chief. With my full ignorance, when I heard you being a Samoan chief, I was thinking about like Eddie Murphy in the movie Coming to America. You know what I'm saying? So, can you tell us a little bit more about like what does it mean to be a Samoan chief? Like, what do you do, and like, does it actually uh, does it have any impact in your interest in working and caring for the community here as a landscape architect?
You mean here in the US?
In your profession as a landscape architect, because I know you do a lot of work for community, especially like
Yeah, I understand
your
yeah. Um,
uh, yeah.
well, maybe there's two answers, right? So, the sort of you know, Matai titles. So like, I have a name, like my Matai title is Tivawi, and it's a title, the name remains the same. And as elders pass away in a family, extended family, that title name is saved and then bestowed on younger, either, men or women for the next generation. And so, there's a lineage of names, of chief titles that run through usually family lines. Um, and really it's like the responsibilities are, as an elder, making big decisions for the village. When major decisions are sort of, need to be um, decided or discussed, we all gather together. And it's really, it's been interesting sort of being here, and um, also with a lot of other, Pacific Island and Maori community coming through New York. It's been great to be able to share that sort of knowledge and to share that sort of responsibility and to be recognized as having a chief title. And there's certain protocols of welcoming, and I feel, and so being here, that feels almost more special in a way. And I've been, invited to host arbor ceremonies, and I recently co-hosted an arbor ceremony for the opening of the Oceanic Wing at the Met. So there are, gatherings that are significant, moments of meeting and connection that as a Matai, I play a role in that ritual and that coming together. In terms of my personal work in our office, I mean, I would say that, we have an interest in transforming. We have an interest in sort of affordable and supportive housing through the city. It's a big chunk of our work. And, I think for me personally, I am drawn to transforming, landscapes and improving these spaces and for these, families all through the city. And I feel like in my role, in my sort of, Samoan role behind on the other side of me being a landscape architect, I feel that the sort of responsibility in some ways does come through, and it doesn't need to be, it's not something I kind of, project out, but it's more of an internal, moment that I have, as someone with my heritage. And I'm sure all of us have a similar, you draw on your histories, you draw on your family experience, as you work. And I'm sure that sort of resonates in different ways.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a question by Raha. She says, "Thank you, Stephen. I loved hearing more about your background. I would love to know how you see the field of landscape architecture having changed over the years that you have been practicing in New York. Any guidance for emerging designers in today's environment?"
Good question. I think it's really exciting moment to be a landscape architect. I think I think cities need us more than ever. I think we have the tools and the communication skills to help solve some of the challenges that are affecting us, both at big scales of the city, of the urban sort of like fabric, but also, small interventions, small things, small moments through our city. So, yeah, I mean, as chatting with Ethan and kind of talking about this over the last week, I think we both feel really happy to be kind of in this profession and to be in, and right now I think more than ever, I think another piece of advice would be, take the opportunities that come, and they don't come often, but when they do, you should jump at it, And I think the other thing was maybe something that I chatted about before, but risk taking a risk. And I mean, for me, it was kind of insane opening my own firm. I didn't really have a plan. And it's taken a while to kind of like concoct a plan, like it's like learning to drive while you're on the road kind of thing. But I do think that I think that risk taking is important in what we do in this profession, whether it's sort of individual projects, whether it's how we communicate with clients, whether it's, how you sort of generate and stay engaged in the work that you do. So, you know, there's a few things that might be helpful.
She says thank you. Um, I don't know. I had a question for Ethan. Steven is basically a daredevil. He's very he's very risk taker, and okay, this is maybe it's a complex question, but as you guys come from a similar regional culture in a sense. Ethan, how do you feel right now? You're a young professional. Are you do you feel like less inclined to take more risks, or you're like tomorrow you're joining a restaurant and washing dishes? Like, what is it like? How do you see that like now in today's world? Because it's different, and the Gen Zs and the all younger millennials are way different than older people. So I don't know. I just wanted to hear your take on that. What do you feel like?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's two thoughts for me. I think naturally and personally, I don't know if it's that I take risks or I just don't think about my decisions and then deal with it later, you know. But after
Great.
That's
talking,
good.
right, after like the conversations I've had with Stephen, it 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 kind of puts me at ease to know that, you end up where you need to be almost in I don't want to sound, a bit cliche, but like it's almost like you're destined to go wherever you go. But then there is also that scary, realistic thought process, I guess, especially being, on a visa in a foreign country. There is obviously, things you do have to think about. So I don't know. It's always for me in my life right now, it's always a bit of a conflicting thing, maybe. But I feel
Right.
like it's fine to take risks at this
Awesome.
point. Yeah.
Awesome.
God, don't blame me. You've been
Because of Steve.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, I don't know. What if anybody else, please feel free to unmute yourself.
I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, Stephen, this is Nicole. I was Ethan in the previous BIPOC dialogue, so I really appreciated the conversation between the two of you. I think I was really struck by how strong and how much you center like ritual and connection to your culture here, and I was curious if that connection has always been this strong, like throughout your time as you settled in the US. Like, I feel like I'm currently a stage of my life right now where I've been in the US for almost 10 years, and now I'm just starting to have this sort of like, oh, right, this is a really important part of me. Whereas, like, that wasn't something that I prioritized in my youth. So, just curious to
Mm,
hear about how that's kind of evolved the longer you've settled here, and if you would like,
yeah,
do you consider yourself American? Like, is that something that comes up?
yeah. No, thanks, Nicole. No, that's a good question. It's definitely, it's definitely grown in me, living here. And I think becoming a parent has definitely sort of, reminded me, and sort of all of these memories of being a child and being, and so I think it's sort of progressed, and also that kind of idea of being responsible and kind of like, this is a role, in terms of being a Matai and kind of like sharing and kind of continuing, these stories and connections. And so I would say, yeah, it's definitely grown while I've been here, and also as a professional, and being more confident in our work and building a body of work that you feel, you know, um, gives form for your creative output. I think it takes a while. Landscapes take ages, to build and mature. And I think that's part of it too. It's like for us as designers, and to kind of have built work and to kind of look at it and poke it and experience it and learn from them. And then, like I feel like it's just a longer journey than maybe some other, sort of creative output. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things in there that I think for me personally have, reinforced that feeling, that connection.
You.
Anyone else?
Um, I don't know. I think one of the themes that you guys spoke a lot was about basically the focus of community and how that was ingrained from a very, very, from the family setting until now. And I don't know if you guys could speak about it, of how that has translated into like maybe design, or it has translated into interacting with your community. Like how do you guys have it right now? What is happening right now with that?
Could you rephrase the question?
In a sense, you mentioned a lot about, or it was a theme, I think, a recurring theme about community and the focus of community, about family, about thinking that we are all together and not in a sense individual, and how has that translated into work and also personal life, or do you have more impact also? Do you have other things that you do as a person? Oh, of course you do, Stephen. But yeah, if you could tell us more, to speak to that a little bit.
I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but I think that sort of, yeah, strong connections of community and sort of my personal history, I think has really impacted the way I listen. And I think that's sort of key in terms of what we do as landscape architects. And being open and respectful and understanding and kind of patient, to hear stories and to listen and to ask questions. Like I think generally I can see for me, myself and our work, I think, we pay attention to that. And I think it's really important when you're working and transforming, parts of neighborhoods or working with diverse communities, I think as a basic thing. And I think that's definitely strong part of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, I have another question if no one else has questions.
Go
Like, I guess for the both of you, other people, it could be landscape architects, it could be, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the profession, just like people you really look up to that really inspired you through your career.
Who's going to go
I'll
first?
go. I guess I'll go first. Maybe Steven now. I don't know. I don't think I guess I'm still sort of experiencing the field, and I don't think I have a main mentor or influence just yet, but maybe Steven could be my first, because I think I've always, in every office I've been in, I feel like everyone I meet, and especially the seniors, I I I try to get a mentor out of them, and I think it's more on a personal level, I guess, for me. There's not like a main designer or anything like that, at least for me, you know. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, no. I think for me there isn't one particular designer or entity. I mean we come from, the culture of landscape architecture is just so many amazing giants, and to be aware of our history, to be aware of all of these incredible people and that have come before us, I think is important to stay engaged, understand our history, understand where we've come from, is a way of like helping us shape what we're going to do, where we're going. And so, I mean, yeah, I mean, I have a very eclectic interest, and yeah, not necessarily one particular designer or sort of entity that really, that I could answer that question, Yeah. So it's not non-answer really.
We have a question from Max Krusha, and he says, "Thank you for sharing both of your stories. Can you talk about one of your earlier projects and how you figured out where to start? What would you do differently now compared to then?"
I'll go. Good question. I think I think as a young designer, we're often, I would say I was, very, I think as a young designer, I was really focused on form making and sort of like being true to the sort of conceptual like idea in a sort of like in a physical form, in a physical kind of manifestation of that. And I would say, through experience, it's like it's less about that. It's more about the big idea, the big sort of the other things that are not so visual. I would say that I find really drive, projects. And I think as a young designer, when you're fresh out of school, like it's really precious, right? You draw something, you put it up, it's like it's mine, I made it, I did it. But I think with building and time and distance, you really sort of distill like the things that are really important, and it's often not the geometry or not the kind of form making. It's the spatial conjuring, and that's all of those things that are sort of come together, and invisible, and ecology and time, and and I think as landscape architects, like it's such a mobile, moving, dynamic world that we think about. And I think that's the beauty of what we do. It's not a fixed thing. It's not like, here it is, nothing's going to change. It's like we're triggering ecologies and moments, and and it's about time. And I don't know, I think 30 years of working has probably given me that's a different perspective that I have now.
Great answer.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I think it's time to wrap up. Thank you, Stephen and Ethan, for such an interesting conversation tonight. We really appreciate both of you for opening up and sharing your journeys and stories and helping us highlight and promote BIPOC landscape architecture professionals, which is very needed in the profession. We hope to see you all later in the year for our next dialogue in June 2026. Thank you, everyone, so much, and have a good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Manuia Lipo. Thanks, Ethan.
Thank you.
That was great.
Yeah. Oh.